Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge. Today we have a playthrough video for you, and this playthrough video is going to differ substantially in a couple of ways from most of the playthroughs that you see on this channel. Now, as you can see, the subject for today's playthrough is Roads to Gettysburg 2, Lee Strikes North. This is from the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series, which is a very popular series and has been around now for just over 30 years. Originally published by Avalon Hill, it's currently published by Multiman Publishing. And while it probably doesn't need much of an introduction for most of the viewers out there, just briefly to give you an overview if you are unfamiliar with the GCACW, it's an operational level Civil War game where the turns are one-day turns. The hexes on the maps represent 1 mile, and the units are represented mostly by divisions and brigades, with the occasional regiment thrown in. The divisions and brigades are composed of a varying number of strength points, with each strength point representing about 500 infantrymen. Leaders are represented in the game, and they are primarily corps and army level leaders. It's, as I said, it's a very popular system. And when it was released in 1992, the first game was Stonewall Jackson's Way. I actually did purchase that game at that time when it came out, but for any number of reasons, it just didn't really click with me. I think I got it home, made a half-hearted attempt to read through the rules, didn't even bother punching the counters, and eventually ended up selling the game, which was kind of unheard of for me back in the 90s. And, you know, I'm not quite sure why it didn't connect with me at the time. I've got some theories. I think at the time that the game was released, Avalon Hill was kind of all but dead to me by the late 80s, well, say the beginning of the 1990s, end of the 1980s. They at that point they seemed to be moving into releasing simpler games that just really didn't have much interest for me. And I don't know if maybe that I had that prejudice sort of going into the attempt to learn the GCACW rules then at the time. But I do know that 92 was right at the beginning of sort of my peak World in Flames playing period. That, you know, that was 92 till about 2004, 2005. Played more World in Flames probably than certainly than any other single game. But it was also a time period where I had just recently discovered the gamers, and so if I wasn't playing World in Flames, I was playing TCS, OCS, or the CWB. And so Stonewall Jackson's Way just kind of went by the side, and you know, I never really got into the system at all over the years. I was aware of subsequent volumes coming out. I'd see them in the game shop from time to time, but never really had the urge to like I said, to dive into the game and see what it was all about. That is until last year, when On to Richmond 2 was nearing the end of its pre-order run and was due to be released soon. I got kind of caught up in a little bit of the buzz around the impending release of On to Richmond 2 and started looking at several GCACW videos out there on YouTube, on some other channels, and decided, you know, this looks like something maybe I would appreciate nowadays, and put my pre-order in. Of course, I realized it was going to be probably 6 or 8 months before I could get, you know, my copy in my hands, and didn't really want to wait that long. So I began looking to see if I could find some copies of some of the other games that were available in the system. So I've picked up, you know, Hood Strikes North, Atlanta Is Ours, Roads to Gettysburg 2, as you see here, and even managed to track down just recently an unpunched copy of Battle Above the Clouds. So the collection has grown quite a bit, and when On to Richmond 2 did finally arrive, I sat down and I read through the series rules, and those are the latest version of the series rules. I know they've evolved over the years. I can't say how much they've evolved over the years. I know there have been some changes to the system, but I wanted to have the latest, most current rule set before I really tried the game out to see how it plays. And so I've read through the series rulebook a couple of times now. I think I have a fairly good grasp of the rules, although I'm sure there will be some mistakes made. But I have yet to actually play a game of GCACW of any scenario, and that's where one of the big differences between this playthrough and the normal playthroughs you see on this channel. I'm going to be playing this cold, as it were, having never pushed the pieces across the map, and that's not something that I usually do. The games that you've seen me do playthrough videos on are games that I have a lot of experience with, hundreds if not thousands of hours of playtime over the years. And this is going to be a little bit different. I thought perhaps it might be interesting, or at least entertaining, for you to see me try to come to grips with a new system here the first time I get some pieces on the map. Now, the other way in which this playthrough is going to be considerably different from most of the stuff I do here is that I have chosen a one-turn scenario. It's a small scenario. It's not a tiny scenario, but it is a small scenario, and it's only one turn. And when you compare that to the other playthrough videos I've done, which are usually very large games like Last Blitzkrieg, World in Flames, and campaign scenarios at that, we're going basically to the opposite end of the spectrum from what you usually see here. We're going to do a very small, very short playthrough of a scenario here. Now, the good thing is you're going to get to see the entire scenario played out in this single video. So with all that out of the way, let's kind of dive in, and we'll see how things go. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of room for comments from more experienced GCACW players, not only on rules mistakes that I'm liable to make, but also from a strategic and tactical standpoint. I really am clueless, have no idea what I'm doing in this system to achieve what it is that I need to achieve for victory. So this should be entertaining. Let's just give it a shot and see what happens. I'll start off with a brief overview of the scenario situation for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, as well as give you my kind of newcomer's assessment of what is going to be involved in this particular scenario. The scenario, it takes place on September 14th, 1862, just a one-turn scenario, hence the title of this video. And this puts it right about the climax of Lee's 1862 Maryland campaign. The Army of the Potomac is closing in from the east for the kill, and Lee needs to buy some time in order to concentrate his scattered Army of Northern Virginia. And it looks like in this scenario that Longstreet's troops have been tasked with holding off the Union forces approaching from the east here at South Mountain. They're going to need to defend and hold the passes over South Mountain in order to get Lee the time he needs. Now we see a concentration of Confederate troops here. There's D.H. Hill's small division, along with a few weak brigades that are set up here basically at Turner's Gap, and then we have Fox's Gap just south of it here. The bulk of Longstreet's troops are way up here in the north at Hagerstown. He's got a large division with 10 strength points in it, along with Hood's division and another brigade belonging to Evans. On the other side of the hill, we've got the Union Army of the Potomac with apparently two corps here. Reno's 9th Corps leading the way, with Hooker's 1st Corps following right behind them. And there are two special rules for this scenario, which is one reason why I chose this scenario, because as you'll see, these special rules are pretty straightforward. The first one is that the Union automatically wins the first activation, or wins initiative for the first activation, and then after that we will determine initiative normally by rolling the dice. The second special rule says that no Union unit may move into any hex adjacent to Burkittsville, which is located here, or Knoxville down here next to the Potomac. And I believe the reason for that rule's existence is we've got Crampton's Gap and the Brownsville Gap located here, both of which are adjacent to Burkittsville, and there's another pass here down by the river. So basically, what that rule does is it shuts off the southern passes here to the Union forces, which is going to make them either kind of bash their way straight up the National Road here through Turner's Gap or maybe Fox's Gap. There are a couple of passes, or at least roads, across the mountains further to the north here. We've got Hamburg Pass up here. Now, mountains in this series are impassable terrain unless you enter it via some type of road hex side, which is why these passes are so important. So effectively what we have is basically a wall here south of the Confederate deployment here. This is all basically shut off or walled off to the Union forces. And so it would appear that the initiative, or at least the offensive burden, is going to be on the Union troops in this particular scenario. And it would appear that it looks like it may just be a straightforward, just trying to bash their way through the defenders here of Turner's Gap, certainly before they can receive some substantial reinforcements up here from the Hagerstown area. There may be some possibility for a maneuver here to potentially go around the Confederates, but I don't know how practical that is, given my lack of experience with the system. So the Union does have the advantage in numbers. They have about twice as many strength points as the Confederates do in this scenario, but time is of the essence for them. They've got just a single turn in order to seize their objectives, and victory in this scenario is determined via victory points. The victory points, there are 4 locations on map that will award victory points to the Union if they control them at the end of the scenario. You see the first one is right here. This is Rohrersville. I've got a control marker there. Boonesboro, this one provides the greatest number of victory points for the Union, and then the other 2 are Zittlestown here where D.H. Hill is located, and Mountain House where Garland's brigade is currently stationed. Now, both sides will also receive victory points for eliminating enemy strength points in combat retreats or cavalry retreats. So, looks like like I said, the basic task for the Union is to somehow force their way across South Mountain here. They'd like to particularly grab Boonesboro, which is a nice intersection on the road network here on the west side of South Mountain. So with that established, I guess we are ready to just kind of dive right in, and I guess we'll start with, it'll be the Union getting the first activation. Seeing as this is my very first GCACW game, I'm going to take things a little bit slowly to make sure I'm doing them properly. Definitely going to do things by the book, and so I'm going to take a look at the basic game sequence of play. There are 5 phases in each game turn in the basic game. The first phase is the random events phase, and there are no random events in this scenario, so we can skip that. That brings us to the leader transfer phase, where both players have an opportunity to transfer their leaders to other subordinate units. Since I don't really know what I'm doing, and it looks to me as if the leaders are in reasonably good locations, I'm just going to go ahead and leave them where they are. And we're going to move on to the action cycle. Now, this is really the heart of each game turn in this series. And the first thing we do is the initiative segment, which normally we would dice to see who has the initiative and who's going to be able to act in the current action phase. However, per the scenario rules, we know that the Union automatically wins initiative for this first action phase. And that means that the Union's going to be able to activate either a single unit or one of their leaders. And the advantage of choosing a leader activation is that it allows you to activate any number of eligible units basically at the same time and allow them to all act within this single action phase. Now, to be eligible, the units need to be subordinate to the leaders. So in the case of, say, Reno here, if we activate Reno, it would be any unit in the 9th Corps would be eligible, so long as they have a fatigue level of 3 or less, and they are within his command radius. And the command radius for all leaders in this series, at least in the basic game, is 3 hexes. And as you can see with Reno here, we've got Cox out here within 3 hexes and Rodman within 3 hexes. So seeing as we've got the entire 9th Corps within his command radius, we're going to go ahead and activate Reno, and then having activated Reno, he's going to select all 4 of the 9th Corps units to act. Now, the other advantage of activating doing a leader activation, as opposed to just activating a single unit, is that the leader will provide a small bonus to the die roll when you roll to determine how many movement points are going to be available for units activating in this activation. So this series, GCACW, is a roll to move series, and actually I really like that, particularly at this level of gaming and in this circumstances, this era. I think it is. I think it's fantastic, and I know there are a lot of people that aren't real keen on roll to move, but probably someday I'll do a video, maybe just sort of a war game philosophy 101 kind of video discussing the whole roll and move and why I like it and why I think it's more than appropriate in a series like this. So having said that, let's go ahead and make the roll. We're going to roll, because this is an infantry leader activation. I'm going to roll 1d6. I'm going to add +1 to that to determine the movement points that all of the units activated are going to be able to use. You can see that 3 + 1 becomes a 4. Now, one of the, I guess, potential downsides to doing a leader activation is that all of the units are going to be basically saddled with the same number of movement points. So had I activated these divisions individually, one may have 4 movement points, another one may have gotten 6, and of course you could always do a lot worse than that, end up with 1 or 2 movement points. So now that we've established how many movement points each of the units has to spend, now we're going to set about activating each of the units individually and having them move and attack using those movement points. Now, there is no separate movement and combat phases in this system. The units all move and attack as part of their activation, and the attacks consume or require a varying number of movement point costs, which again is something I really like. They've got, looks like, 4 different types of attack, everything from a column of route attack to a hasty attack, a normal attack, and a prepared attack. Each of those is going to cost different number of movement points, but they are also going to involve a die roll modifier in the ensuing combat. So as you might expect, if you're doing a prepared attack, it's going to cost you 4 infantry movement points, but it's going to give you a +1 on the attack dice roll, versus a hasty attack, which only costs you 1 movement point, but you're going to incur a -1 dice roll. So I kind of like how that works. So what I'll do here is take a quick look and see what maybe I want to do here, and then we'll go ahead and see how this activation turns out. Looking things over, I do want to say kind of right off the bat that the maps in this series are very attractive and appear to be quite functional. You get a little taste of it here as I've zoomed in a little bit closer. You can see they've got extensive road networks portrayed, which is key. I've heard a lot of players talk about the importance of the road networks, and looking at the movement point costs on the terrain effects chart for the various terrains, they're just punishing if you're not moving along a road. So roads do appear to be vitally important in this series, as they were historically. So again, that's another feather in the cap here with GCACW, as I'm kind of just getting into it here. I think we're going to start off by moving Cox first. And while I understand, or at least I'm pretty sure I understand, how combat works in this series, I've got really no idea what constitutes a good attack or what you need to have a decent chance of success. So let's find out right out of the gate. You see, Cox here has 6 strength points, which makes him considerably larger than Colquitt's brigade with only 2 strength points. I'm going to spend 1 movement point to enter this hex, and I would have to stop because I've entered the zone of control here of an enemy unit. But we are then going to follow up with an actual attack. Unfortunately, I only have 3 movement points left, which is 1 short of being able to launch a prepared attack. So I'm going to end up having to do a normal attack, which is going to cost me a further 2 movement points, leaving me with just 1 left. And now we need to resolve this attack. I guess the first thing we'll do is determine the odds ratio. And again, it's going to be 6-2. I don't see any modifiers to the combat strengths of the various units. So that's going to be a right at a 3-1. The combat ratio then is going to provide a die roll modifier to the attack. And in this system, both sides, both the attacker and defender, are each going to roll 1d6. Each roll is going to be modified, and you're going to take the defender's modified total and subtract that from the attacker's modified total. And that's going to give you a net differential. And then you consult the combat chart and apply the results to both the defenders and the attackers. There aren't a lot of modifiers, which is nice. And I will say that overall, this strikes me as a reasonably simple system, and I don't say that in any sort of derogatory way. As a matter of fact, it's actually a bit of a compliment. You could call it a simple system, or you could call it an elegant system, because I think it seems to provide a really nice historical feel to it without a lot of rules overhead, at least in the basic game. The standard basic game rule book is 24 pages, which is not all that big these days. And of those 24 pages, there's maybe, 18 or 19 that are actual rules. So we'll see. We'll see how things actually end up playing out. But so far, the impression I get from reading the basic game rules is that this is indeed a really solid system. So back to the combat resolution here. What I'll do is total up the attacker's die roll modifiers, and then we'll take a look at the defender's die roll modifiers. First thing we look at is a flank attack bonus. I'll get into that probably further down the road here when we actually get a situation where it's going to apply. But right now there's going to be a 0 for the flank attack bonus. Artillery modifiers. The Union has 2 artillery factors. The defenders have 1, which is going to give us a net +1 artillery differential. And the terrain that the defenders are in is rough terrain. So looking at the artillery modifier summary, rough terrain on the +1 column, it's a -1 asterisk, which means we need to roll a die, and if it is even, we will use the modifier, the -1 modifier. If it's odd, it is not used. And we rolled a 4, so unfortunately for the attackers, that will be a -1 for the artillery modifier. The defender's flanks are not refused. This is not an assault action. The ratio modifier, that brings us back to the 3-1, that +2, so that's going to give the attacker a net +1 so far. And now the tactical modifier. It's 2 here for the attacker, it's 2 for the defender, which gives us a +0. And then there's no rain this turn. So the only other modifier is the attack type, and we're doing a hasty, or I'm sorry, we're doing a normal, which is going to give us a +0. So with all those modifiers, it's -1 for the artillery. It's +2 for the artillery, or for the ratio difference, so a net +1 to the Union die. Now on the defender's side, they're not defending across a bridge, dam, ferry, or ford. There is a creek here, but with a presumably a bridge across the creek, but I don't believe that this bridge refers to where roads cross creeks. That's only for minor and major rivers. It's not defending in a mountain hex. It's not defending against attack up a ridge. It's not defending in a hill hex. It is defending across a creek, though, so that's going to be +1 to the defender's die roll. And half of the units are not demoralized too. Beyond that, I don't see any game-specific modifiers that are going to apply. So we have a +1 to the Union die roll. We have a +1 to the Confederate die roll. And what I think I've seen most players do is they simply sort of subtract the defenders' DRMs from the attackers' DRMs, since they're going to cancel each other out in this case. This would be a +1. Take the defender's +1, subtract that, and it's even. So rather than rolling both dice and having to add 1 to each, it's just the same as just simply rolling the dice. So let's roll the dice and see what happens here. Okay, so I'll roll both dice at the same time, and just for this video at least, moving forward, the white die will be the Union die, and the red die will be the Confederate die. And we've got a +0 here to the die roll. And we get a 5 for the Union and a 3 for the defender. So what does that mean? Well, that gives us a +2 differential. And then we're going to take a look at the combat chart here. Some bad glare, and you can see we've got a combat differential down the left column here, and then it's cross-indexed across the top here with the size of the force. The blue side here, the left side, is the defender results, and over here we see the attacker results. So I'll take a close look here and see what we actually got. With the +2, there are only 2 defending strength points. It's going to be a disorganized fatigue and retreat on the part of the defenders, and then for the attackers who have 6 strength points, it's going to be a disorganized, fatigued, and an advance. Let's see what that looks like actually back on the map. Before we do anything else, I need to backtrack, and I should have placed this fatigue 1 on the Cox unit as soon as I began its activation. That's something that I'm going to have to really make an effort to remind myself to do, that apply that fatigue or increase the fatigue at the beginning of the unit's activation. Now, rather than placing the fatigue on top of the unit and just having us staring at a bunch of fatigue units, I think there's a convention among GCACW players that you can place the fatigue markers underneath the units, thereby allowing you to still see which units are where. Now, as far as implementing the combat results, as I said, we had a disorganized, fatigued, and retreat result on the part of the defenders. So first thing we're going to do is disorganize Colquitt, which means turning his strength point marker over to the backside. You can see here it's got 2 numbers. The superscript number here is the manpower, so they haven't taken any losses. It's still 2 manpower in the unit. However, because they're disorganized, their combat value, which is the large number here, has been reduced as a result of that. Now, in addition to becoming fatigued, they're also going to accrue 3 fatigue levels. So we'll put a fatigue 3 on Colquitt's brigade. And then the other part of the result is a retreat. The unit must retreat 2 to 4 hexes. Now, generally, I've found the rules in GCACW to be well done. The rule book, for the most part, is pretty well written. It's very clear. There are 2 areas, though, that I think are a little clunky, maybe not written the best. I think they do the job of getting across what they need to do, but it just requires a little more brain power than I was hoping to have to use for that. And those 2 areas are the flank attack bonus in combat and the retreats. Now, to the system's credit, they do provide a really nice retreat chart in the play aids to help you process the retreats. And I guess we'll go ahead and open that up and look at it now. I would imagine the more I play this system, the easier and quicker the retreat resolution is going to be. So basically, there are a couple of sides to this retreat chart. We're going to be looking at retreat chart 1 for at least this first hex, and apparently you're going to consult this chart hex by hex in this retreat. Now, it basically just lists a number of priorities that the unit has to move into, which really is pretty common. I think you'll find many game systems out there when it comes to retreats have a system of priorities where the unit's going to go. So that's not unusual. This just seems to be a little more fiddly maybe than I've seen in some of the other systems, but let's see how well it works. First thing we're going to do is we're going to have to look at a hex that allows the retreat to follow a road, pike, trail, or railroad into a hex more distant from the active enemy unit than the hex that was retreated out of. That hex is neither in an enemy ZOC nor enemy occupied. So again, fairly standard, with the additional requirement of you'll use a road before you'll go cross country. And in this case, I think that's you can see there are 2 roads leading out of the hex here, one to the north here, and then one back up the pass. And since both of those meet that first priority, I guess it's my choice as to which one I want to move into. And I think what I may do, we have to retreat a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 4 hexes as a result of the combat. So if I were to, initially I would say, well, I'll just retreat back here through the pass, 1, 2. I could come back here to D.H. Hill's hex, which puts me at Zittle's town, which is one of the objectives. So they won't, they're unfortunately going to be disorganized. They're not going to be terribly effective the rest of this scenario, but at least they would be in the way there and able to contribute to some kind of a defense. The other option, if I go north out of here, be 1, 2, 3. I suppose I could stop here in the mountain hex or come back here even to Washington Monument. Again, this is one where having some experience with the game system, I think, would help somewhat. So I tell you what, since we have some uncovered passes up there, let's go here. And again, we would consult the retreat chart for the next hex, and we would be able to use retreat chart 2, I believe, in this case, since we're not exiting an enemy ZOC and it's the second, third, or fourth hexes in a regular retreat. We just basically have to not go into an enemy ZOC or an enemy occupied hex, which is fine. So we can go here for the second hex of the retreat and then back here into this mountain hex for the third. And I believe that is, as far as I'm, at least I have the option of ending the retreat there. So why don't we do that? Now, looking at applying the results to the attacker, we said we received, let's see, it's a +2, there were 6, so it's a disorganized fatigue. So we're going to take and flip Cox's manpower marker over as well. He is also going to pick up 3 additional fatigue levels, so that's going to take him all the way to fatigue level 4, and that means he's going to be done for the day. But he does get to advance after combat into the hex, and now the question is, do I want to do that? Do I want to have him basically kind of tying up that hex there, or do I want to leave it open for some of the follow-on units? 1, 2, 3. See, one of the issues is Cox is now kind of in the way. There is an additional movement point cost that is incurred when you try to march through a hex containing friendly forces of a certain size, and he is big enough to incur that penalty. So I don't know that anybody has the ability to actually make it all the way through his hex this initiative. And like I said, he is basically done with fatigue level 4. He won't be eligible for any future activations this turn. Again, this is a situation where more experience with the system would probably tell me what the better answer is. And I think gets us across the creek. You know, I think I'm going to decline, or am I? There's a road there. Just looking at the roads here, you can see this main road comes up. There's another road that comes off here, which will allow us to continue advancing. But there's also a road here. It looks like there's a road from this hex to this hex, but it really isn't. It's just sort of the green artwork there, which means if we come off the road here, we're going to have to go all the way up and around. If I move him forward, we'll be able to come 1, 2, 3. We'll be able to come right in this way. Maybe, yeah, maybe I will go ahead and advance into the hex. So that's going to wrap up Cox's activation, and then now we'll look at the next unit we want to activate in 9th Corps. Next unit up is fairly obvious, given that everybody's sort of strung out along the road here, and as I said before, moving through friendly units will incur an additional movement point cost, which we'd like to avoid here. So we'll go ahead and activate Wilcox, which means we're going to increase his fatigue level by 1. We'll slide that under there, and he's got 4 movement points now. I think what we'll do is 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we'll bring him up here to Menser's Sawmill. One thing I've noticed about the counters here, they're a little bit, I'll say they're not quite as uniform in size as you would like, which makes it a little more difficult to pick up stacks with your tweezers, as some of the counters are just a hair either wider or taller than others. So Wilcox has moved up here. Unfortunately, he is out of movement points and is unable to make an attack here on the 5th Virginia. So we will continue on, and next up we're going to activate Sturgis's division. That means increasing his fatigue level. And then we're going to march him 4, 1, 2, 3. We'll just move him 1, 2, 3, 4 straight up the road here. And then finally, we will activate Rodman, increase his fatigue level by 1. And we'll see he goes 1, 2, 3, 4. That gets him just over the mountain here. Hooker is sort of right behind 9th Corps. You can see just over here, but I may end up activating 9th Corps again before we get Hooker moving forward. We'll see. So that is all of the units that were activated with this initial activation, which means now we are going to go back and to the initiative segment of the action cycle. We're going to actually roll some dice to see who gets the next initiative. Once again, whenever you see me rolling both dice simultaneously, it's going to be red die is Confederate die, white die is the Union die, and the high roller is going to win initiative. So we've got Confederates win this initiative, and let's see who we want to activate on the map. I'm thinking probably might not be a bad idea to get Longstreet's guys up around Hagerstown in motion, see how far they can make it down, see if they can reinforce the line here.
Well, here we are on the second activation of the very first game turn I've played in this system, and am being presented with some really interesting decisions. And again, I'm starting to see why people think so highly of this system. The Confederates have the initiative, and they are on the defensive. They are trying to keep the Union forces at bay here and preventing them from driving through or across South Mountain. They've got a small brigade here in the mountains and a slightly larger division right behind it along the main road. However, they have Fox's Gap, which right now is only being covered by a very small cavalry regiment. They've got a kind of a disorganized brigade covering the pass further up here, and they've got nobody up here at the Hamburg Pass to covering it. Most of their forces are located way up here at Hagerstown. It's going to take them, at least 2 activations, I think, to get down and in position here. Now, they may win the initiative. They could win 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 initiatives in a row and give them plenty of time to do that. But these guys are a long way away. So does that mean I need to get them hopefully moving right away? Or do I look to try and activate one of the defenders closer to the action here and try to strengthen at least the defenses of Fox's Gap before the Union gets a chance to strike again? And keep in mind, it's not just Fox's Gap that I'm worried about, but I'm also looking at the roads up here. And again, Colquitt, he's in the way. He's gonna force somebody to make an attack on him, but given his combat value, he's not going to be able to put up resistance for very long. So is it a case of activating Hill's division and trying to slide him down here into Fox's Gap, or do we again try to get the larger reinforcements moving? Now, the Confederates get a little bit better bonus for movement with their leaders than the Union does. The Union gets a +1. The Confederates are going to get a 1d6 +2 for their infantry if I were to activate Longstreet. But again, that's only a maximum of 8 movement points, and you can see there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 there. Even to get to the closer Hamburg Pass, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to get ideally to where they'd like to be. Now, there is the possibility of force marching, but boy, I don't really like that, because force marching is automatically going to disorganize the unit, which is going to lower its combat value. And there's a pretty good chance that the unit's going to lose 1 or possibly 2 strength points as stragglers fall out on the force march to get those extra movement points. So I don't think it's really worth it, at least in this situation. Again, I could be wrong given my lack of experience. I just hate the idea of losing manpower just through marching, and certainly being automatically disorganized. I want to make sure that not only do the reinforcing units up here make it to the battle, but I want to make sure that they're actually able to fight once they get there. So again, it's a bit of a dilemma, and I think that even though Longstreet's guys are going to need at least 2, maybe 3 activations to get somewhere where they would actually be useful, I don't know that I can. I think Fox's Gap here is a little more critical and needing to cover that. So I'm going to trust that Garland is going to be able to hold off whatever the Union throws at him, at least for a couple of initiatives. I'm going to activate D.H. Hill's division here. So that means I need to roll a die and let's see how many movement points he's actually going to have. He's going to get 4, which should be more than enough to do what we're looking for him to do. And with that 4, there is, you can see we've got the Jets control marker. There is a road down here. We can come here, and then do we want to slide into the mountains there? Yeah, let's go ahead and we're going to move into the cavalry's hex, but not before I increase his fatigue by 1. So we'll place a fatigue marker under there, and we'll have Hill move up here. And what that does is that may then free up the Virginia Cavalry Regiment to move out. They've got cavalry moves much faster. They get 2d6 movement points, and maybe have the cavalry unit head up and cover one of the more northern gaps, a little bit further from at least immediate threat. And since it wasn't a leader activation, I've activated the one unit. That does it, and now we're going to go right back to rolling for initiative again. Boy, one of the things that I kind of like about this system, it seems like the individual activations go really, really quickly in a lot of cases, particularly if you're just activating a single unit. You'll move, possibly do an attack, and then boom, we're right back to rolling initiative, and maybe it's going back to the other player. So it seems like downtime can be fairly minimal in this system, which is fantastic. As much as I love OCS, the downtime in those bigger games, especially those big East Front games, can be just ridiculous sometimes. You can literally hand the turn over to your opponent while they're doing their movement phase, and you can go out and grab a bite to eat, maybe even a movie, and come back before they finish with those games, which is sort of detracts from the gaming experience a little bit. In the OCS case, the games are engaging enough that you'll kind of put up with it, but it's obviously it's not desirable, and that's one of the things I think BCS fixed that with their alternating activations, where you're just activating one formation. They're much shorter, and so play passes back and forth between the players more frequently, and it looks like GCACW does the exact same thing, which is a big plus in my book, so I like that. All right, let's go ahead and roll our next initiative.
Rolling that initiative for the third action phase, and we've got a Confederate 4 to a Union 2, so the Confederates are going to get the initiative once again, and I think now is the time when we'll go ahead and, since we've got D.H. Hill here, Fox's Gap appears to be covered, we're going to go ahead and get Longstreet's boys on the move. That's going to be activating Longstreet. That means everybody within 3 hexes. It's going to be Evans, Hood, and whose division is that? D.R. Jones. So we'll get these guys going now for the big question of how many movement points they're going to have. We're going to roll one die here. We're going to add 2 to it because it's a Confederate leader activation. A 3 plus 2 is a 5. Now, I can see where some guys may not care for this system. Again, that roll could have been anywhere from a 1, which would have given him 3 movement points, to a 6, which would have given him 8. That's a pretty substantial swing there, and I can see where some folks might consider this a bit of a dicey system. But actually, for me, I think it really works. So we'll start off with activating D.R. Jones' division. Longstreet will accompany them, since they are kind of in the lead here. We've got 5 movement points. Basically just going to have them come down the road here. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll put them right here. And next, get a couple fatigue markers out here, as we'll need it for Hood's division. Give him fatigue level 1. And he'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll have him start to head over maybe towards Hamburg Pass here. And then finally, Evans picks up a fatigue, and 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll have him just follow, I think, Longstreet down here. That's it for the Confederate activation. Now we'll roll initiative again, see who wins the next one. This is going to be a Union 5 to a Confederate 2. So back over to the Union. We'll see who we need to, or who we want to activate this time. I'm thinking it's probably going to be Reno, but let me take a look at it here. We'll pick up in a moment. I'm definitely going to be activating Reno, that's for sure, and that means that I'll select Sturgis as well as Rodman. The question, though, is whether or not to also activate Wilcox here. I don't believe Wilcox is strong enough on his own to push D.H. Hill out of the mountain hex here back through Fox's Gap. I've got, as I see it, a couple of options here. I can try to bring up Reno, move Reno into the hex here, and perhaps even Rodman, and then on a future activation, launch an assault rather than just a divisional attack against D.H. Hill there. That might be enough to do it. But that's assuming the Confederates don't manage to reinforce that hex. The other option I have is maybe swinging Sturgis's division around here and hitting Garland. Garland only has 2 strength points, and we'd have an attack probably fairly similar to what Cox made initially here when he drove Colquitt out. Again, we don't have to kill these guys. We just have to push them out of the way and get through the gap here. If I don't activate Wilcox, that's going to leave him available. It's going to give him a few more options later in the turn. But then again, if I do come around and make an attack with Sturgis that's successful, if Wilcox is activated, he might be close enough. He's closer than Rodman is back here. He might be close enough to actually sort of exploit this success of that attack and maybe even reach Zittlestown, which would be a problem for the Confederates. So again, another tough choice, and maybe it's only a tough choice because, again, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to go ahead and activate Wilcox all the same, and we'll see what happens. I do kind of like how with the leader activation you've got more flexibility just even within the activation itself. You can kind of activate your units in whichever order you want to, and then based on the number of movement points everybody ends up with, based on the success or failure of units that you're activating earlier, that gives you some flexibility as to what you can do with units that have yet to move in this particular activation. So with all 3 divisions, Cox is within command radius, but he's at fatigue level 4, so he is ineligible for further activation this turn. Essentially, he's done for the day, which means he's done for the game. So let's roll the die and see how many movement points the rest of 9th Corps is going to get here. And wow, it's going to be a good one. They rolled a 6 plus 1 for Reno. That gives them 7 movement points. That could cause some issues here, I think, for the Confederates, because even though Rodman's back here, those 7 movement points are going to allow him to move quite a distance. I mean, I'm looking at perhaps coming around the north side here, still focused on Turner's Gap, but with 7 movement points, do I have enough to maybe consider trying to get in or through Hamburg Pass up here, or maybe even going after the even weaker Colquitt, who's basically got half the combat value that Garland has here. So, more decisions, which I absolutely am digging here. But rather than have you listen to me hem and haw for 5 or 10 minutes, I'll just go ahead and do that off camera here, and I will start back up once I've got some sort of plan in mind, and we'll see how it plays out. Okay, let's see if this plan is going to work, see if I have any idea of what I'm actually doing here. We are going to start off by activating Sturgis here, which is stacked with Reno. And first thing we're going to do is increase his fatigue level. He comes up to fatigue level 2. And we are going to send Sturgis along with Reno. We're going to go 1, 2 into this hex here, where we have to stop because of Garland's zone of control, but that's okay because we are now going to spend 4 more movement points for a total of 6 to do a prepared attack on Garland with Sturgis. So the numbers we're looking at are 7 strength points to 2. It's going to be a 3-to-1. And let's take a look at the die roll modifiers. It's going to be no flank attack bonus here. Best case would be maybe 4 covered hexes, but I don't think so because of the mountain hex here. I don't think anybody can actually get in there. But regardless, we're going to be short, I think, of the required hexes for a flank attack in any event. So no modifier there. Artillery modifiers, we have 3 artillery points to 1 artillery point. That's a net +2. However, we are unfortunately in a mountain hex, and that's going to be no effect. So artillery has no effect in mountain hexes. The defender's flanks are not refused. It's not an assault action. The ratio modifier, that's going to give us +2 for the 3-to-1. Tactical modifier, the Confederates have 2. We'll use Reno's 3 here since he's in the hex with the unit making the attack. So that's going to be a +1, bringing us to +3 so far. And it is not raining. Now we'll drop down to attack type is prepared. That's going to be an additional +1 for a total of +4 for the Union die roll modifier. On the defending side, we're not defending across a bridge, dam, ferry, or ford. We are defending in a mountain hex. That's going to be +2 for the Confederates. We're not defending against attack up a ridge or a hill hex or across a creek. No one's demoralized, and none of the game specific applies. So this will net out to a +2 DRM to the attacker's die roll, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens here. See if we can manage to push the defenders out of the hex. And we come up with a 5 and a 5. That's going to be 5 + 2 is a 7, -5 is a net +2 result. Now, technically, it would be 5 + 4 for a 9 and 5 + 2 for 7. 9 minus 7, that gets you the net 2. I kind of like the convention of simply subtracting the defending DRMs from the attacker DRMs and just providing 1 net DRM to the attacker's roll rather than adding separate DRMs to each die. But anyway, and that's maybe an example of one of the areas where I think the rules are a bit, I'd say clunky, or I don't know, they maybe not as streamlined or as tight as they could be. I did find, reading through the basic game rules, that they were maybe a bit wordier than perhaps they could be, but again, they are pretty clear and straightforward. So at least I'll take something that's a little longer and wordier than it needs to be, as long as the clarity is there. So, getting back to the results of the attack here, a +2 for the defender. They've got 2 strength points. It's going to be a disorganized, fatigued, and a retreat of 2 to 4 hexes. So what we'll do here is we will disorganize Garland's unit by flipping him over to his disorganized side. He's going to also, as a result of that, accrue 3 fatigue. This is pretty much going to be, I think, the same result as we had with the initial attack against Colquitt. And now we have a retreat of minimum of 2, maximum of 4 hexes. Now, the only road out, you can see there, the only road out that's going to meet priority number 1 is going to be here into Zittlestown. And now we are free to use the retreat chart 2 for the rest of the retreat. Now, we do have to continue at least 1 more hex, so we won't be able to stop in Zittlestown. Now, do we we'll go again another hex up the road here. We could stop there. The question is, do we want to, or do we want to continue on? I think we're going to leave Garland right there for the moment. He's small enough that I don't think he's going to be any sort of obstacle to Confederates marching through there, so they won't have to pay that extra movement point. Now, on the attacking side, we had 7 strength points, which actually gives us a 1 DA, which is 1 strength point loss. We're going to be disorganized and fatigued, but we do get to advance after combat. So we have our first loss of the game. The Confederates draw first blood here. Just need to find a 6 strength point marker here. We'll replace that. Now they're going to be disorganized and they're going to accrue 3 fatigue levels up to a maximum of 4 on their disorganized side there. And finally, they will get to advance after combat. So they are going to actually take the hex and will have forced Garland back. So Mountain House is now in the Union control, and Sturgis's division occupies that hex. So first of the objectives has been taken, although Cox and now Sturgis are at fatigue level 4, so they're pretty much done for the turn, and in this case, the game. Now, they did have 1 movement point remaining. However, an active unit obtaining a D has its march action terminated. So that is going to be the end of Sturgis's activation. Now we have to look at whether we're going to activate Wilcox here or Rodman next. And there is, it looks like, a pretty good opportunity here for the Union. I'm going to take just a minute to look this over and make sure I don't kind of mess this thing up. Next up, I think we are going to activate Wilcox here. And that means we need to increase his fatigue level by 1. It's going to give him a fatigue 2 now. And he's got 7 movement points. And we're going to have him go 1, 2, 3, 4. And he'll have to stop here because of the zone of control from Colquitt, but that's okay because he has 3 movement points left. He's going to spend 2 of them to make a normal attack on Colquitt. So looking at the numbers here, we have 7, and Colquitt is disorganized, so he's got a combat value of 1. That's going to be 7 to 1. It's actually +6, pretty good modifier. Let's look at the rest of the DRMs. We've got no flank attack, I don't think. 1, 2, 3, yeah, there's going to be no flank attack. Artillery modifiers, we have a 3 to 1 that's +2, but again, we're in the mountain hex, so no effect from artillery. The defender's flanks are not refused. It's not an assault action. We're going to get +6 for the ratio. Tactical modifier is 2 minus 2, that's a 0. It's not raining, and it is a normal attack. So looks like we're just getting the ratio modifier, which is +6, which is pretty substantial. On the defender's side, they're not defending a bridge, dam, ferry, or ford. They are defending in a mountain hex, which is +2, which I'll just subtract from the attacker's modifier. Brings it down from +6 to +4. They're not defending against attack up a ridge or in a hill hex or across a creek, and they are not demoralized. So looks like it is going to be a +4 for Wilcox here. So we've got an opportunity to maybe do some damage, get a decent attack in. Let's see what happens here. And it looks like it's probably going to be a pretty good attack, certainly better than what we've seen. So we've got the 5 +4 makes it 9 minus 3. That's a +6 differential. Now the defenders have 2 manpower, so that's going to be a 1 D and capital R, which is a rout and demoralized. So they are going to inflict 1 strength point loss on Colquitt. That's going to require me to dig out a 1 strength and put it on its disorganized side. He will also accrue 3 more fatigue levels to a maximum of 4. So we'll flip that over, and now he must rout, not retreat, but actually rout, and will receive a demoralized 1 marker as a result of that. So it's the difference between the retreat and the rout is 4 minimum of 4. It's between 4 and 6 hexes, and I believe you use the retreat 1 chart for the first 4 hexes that you enter in a rout. This is going to be fairly straightforward because from this hex there's only one road out that is also farther away from the active unit. That's going to put him here at Washington Monument. Then the retreat follows a road, pike trail or railroad into a hex more distant from an active enemy unit than the hex retreated out of. Again, we're in a mountain hex here, and I think the only way out of the mountain hex is via a road. That's going to put him here, which is going to run into the zone of control here of Reno. So the retreat is into an enemy ZOC, but not an enemy occupied hex. Retreat is into a hex more distant from active enemy unit than the one retreated out of, which is not the case because they're bending around here. They're 2 hexes away here. They're still 2 hexes away. And so it looks like priority 4. Retreat is into an enemy ZOC, but not an enemy occupied hex. Retreat is not into a hex more distant from the active enemy unit retreated than the hex retreated out of. And it looks like we're going to have a manpower loss as a result of that. It's going to be, it's a 1/2 with a note here. The number to the left of slash for manpower loss is retreat or route is along a road, pike, or trail into a friendly occupied hex. Otherwise, you use the number to the right of the slash, which would be a 2. So as I understand this, as Colquitt's remaining strength point retreats here to Washington Monument, as they come here, they are going to suffer 2 more strength point losses, which will eliminate them. The only question is, would it be possible from this hex to retreat either here or here? There is an allowance to override the retreat priorities, but I don't know. I wouldn't think you can retreat across a hex side that is normally impassable. Let me go ahead, and this is kind of important, so I'm going to make sure I get this right. I'm going to look this up and see what I can find. I'll be right back. Well, I managed to look it up and find it, and it did not take that long, which is actually a good mark for the quality of the rules. It's rather clear that you cannot enter or exit a mountain hex except across a road, pike, or trail or railroad hex side, and that goes for movement as well as for retreats, which means Colquitt's unit is going to be forced down here through Zittlestown, and when they get there, they're going to run into the zone of control of Reno and therefore suffer another step loss, which will end up eliminating the brigade. So we'll mark the losses on the track over there, and then for the attacker, who has a +6, I think we said, it's a +6 differential. He has 7 strength points. That's going to give us just an advance. So he will then be able to advance into the hex there, and with 1 remaining movement point, we'll go ahead and push Wilcox all the way through and up to Washington Monument here. So not quite into Zittlestown, but a very successful attack against the disorganized brigade of Colquitt, who were severely outnumbered. Again, the good dice roll there obviously helped. You can see I've turned Cox here sideways. I've also turned Sturgis, rotated him 90 degrees, just to reflect that they're at fatigue level 4 and are therefore no longer eligible for activations. That's going to leave just Rodman back here to activate, and we'll increase his fatigue level to 2. And with 7 movement points, let's see how far he can go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can have him try and follow Wilcox through here. Speaking of fatigue, what is significant with that attack, we've seen in the 2 previous attacks that the attackers did not roll well enough to avoid being disorganized and accruing 3 levels of fatigue. Wilcox accrued no additional fatigue as a result of that attack. So he's still at fatigue level 2, which means he potentially could activate up to 2 more times this turn, which I think is important. Let's see. You know, I think Rodman, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think he will try and follow Wilcox through the mountains there, and I believe that is going to do it for this activation. Let's go ahead and roll initiative to see who gets the next activation. And unfortunately for the Confederates, it's going to be yet another Union activation, which means I would expect Reno to proceed to follow up his successes this past activation and seize Zittlestown, and maybe even try and push on towards Boonesboro. So let me take a look and see what I want to do here. Make sure that is in fact the case. I'm not even sure. You know, Reno is here. His command radius is 3 hexes, but I don't know if this mountain hex, if I can use that mountain hex. Otherwise, it would be 1, 2, 3, and only Rodman would be within Reno's command radius. Wilcox would be out of it. So let me see what I'm going to do. Either activate Reno to get both of these divisions to continue moving, or if that's not possible, we'll probably end up activating Wilcox here, I would think. So let me look that up in the rules, and then we'll proceed here shortly. I did in fact find the answer I was looking for, and while it took me a little bit longer to find than the last thing I looked up, it still didn't take very long at all. A couple of 3 minutes maybe, certainly less than 5 minutes, which I think is another mark in the good column for the system rules here, the basic game rule book. The one thing though I wish the standard basic game rules had was a good index. It in fact has no index, although it does have a moderately detailed table of contents. Still, even a good table of contents is no real substitute for a good index. So that's something I hope to see maybe in version 1.6 of the basic game rules when they come out. Just some food for thought. Anyway, back to the game itself. The answer was in fact that terrain does not matter when it comes to command radius in tracing through hexes. The only thing you're looking for are enemy occupied hexes or hexes in an enemy zone of control that are not occupied by a friendly unit. So the terrain here won't matter, which means both Wilcox and Rodman here are within Reno's command radius. So therefore we will in fact do a leader activation of Reno, and we'll select Wilcox and Rodman. Now we need to roll to see how many movement points they're going to get, and it's going to be a +1 thanks to Reno. Not that they're going to need it. That's a 6. +1 is 7, so quite a number, or quite a bit here to work with. I don't think. Well, maybe they can use this. All right. Let's look at this. We'll start obviously here with Wilcox, since he's kind of in the way, as it were, and with that, Wilcox is going to increase his fatigue. Now he's going from fatigue 2 to fatigue 3. He's organized, which tells me that he is now going to have to make the extended march roll. And this is one of the downsides of pushing your troops a little bit too far in any particular turn. With the extended march table, we'll go ahead and roll a die here with potential to disorganize or possibly lose some strength points as stragglers fall out. Looking at the table here, since Wilcox is still organized, it looks like there's no chance of any strength point losses, but on a modified 6 or better, he will become disorganized. We've got some potential modifiers here. That's not going to apply. It's not exhausted. It's not a wagon train. We do have a +1 for other Union units. So because it's not a garrison unit or cavalry, it's going to incur that +1. There's no heat. It's not an advanced game. not 1861. So it looks like just a +1. So I will need to roll a 4 or less to keep Wilcox on his organized side, and rolled another 6, which is going to flip him immediately to his disorganized side. You can see the effect that has is reducing his combat value from 7 to 5. Now beyond that, I don't think there is necessarily any immediate effects, but with that, we are going to spend 1 to move into Zittlestown, which is the second of the 4 geographic objectives in this scenario. And it means the Union forces now stretch from one side of the of Turner's Gap all the way across South Mountain to the other. They are going to have to stop here because of the zone of control here from Garland's brigade, which is fine because we still have 6 movement points left, and we're going to go ahead and use 4 of those to launch a prepared attack on Garland, and that's going to leave us with 2 movement points remaining. We can see here that Garland is disorganized as well, so he's got a strength of 1, and it's going to be 1 to I think 5, so 5 to 1 on the ratio. There's no flank attack bonus. Artillery modifiers, it's a +2, and they are defending in rolling terrain. So on the artillery modifiers summary, a +2 in rolling is no effect. The defender's flanks are not refused. It's not an assault action. The 5 to 1 gives us a +4 for the ratio modifier. The tactical modifier is going to be a 0, as they're both 2s, and then we're going to get a further +1 for the prepared attack. So it looks like a +5 so far for the Union. On the defending side, running down those DRMs, not defending across a bridge or not in a mountain hex. They're not defending against an attack up a ridge. They're not in a hill hex. They're not defending across a creek. I don't see anything here, so it looks like it is in fact a +5. So this is, I think, perhaps the best attack we've seen yet. So here's the die roll, and even though both sides rolled pretty well, we're going to add 5 to the Union die here, make it 10 to 5. That's a differential of +5. What that's going to do to Garland is be a 1 DR, so they're going to lose a strength point. They're going to be disorganized, pick up 3 more fatigue, which is going to cap out at fatigue level 4, and then it is in fact a capital R, which is a rout. So they are going to get a demoralized 1 marker. They're going to also then have to retreat somewhere between 4 and 6 hexes. Now on the attacker's side, he has 7 manpower with the +5. That is going to be an EA. So he's going to end his action here, not able to expend the last 2 movement points that he has, but he will be able to advance into the hex. And I'm going to have to see maybe if that's what I really end up want to do or not. Bring him out here and have him end here. We've got Rodman coming behind. I don't know if we want to make sure we've got some Union troops in Zittlestown, because D.H. Hill here is still able to move, and I don't want to have him slide back in behind us. Or are we going to send Rodman down and out the gap towards perhaps Boonesboro, now that Garland's going to be pushed back? Or we have an opportunity here to maybe cut off D.H. Hill from the rest of the army there. Let me go ahead and I'll implement the results here, and then we'll pick up with the rest of the activation when we activate Rodman. Well, I've implemented the results of the combat. You can see that it was at Garland, I believe it was. Yes, Garland went ahead and retreated through Boonesboro, kept going along the pike here, and has crossed over to the west side of, I think that's Antietam Creek there. Well, would have maybe liked to have him retreat down the road south here towards Roarsville, just to put something in the way of any Union troops heading that direction. But under the retreat rules, I would not have been able to come back here, over here, and continue down this way. So they needed to keep opening up the distance from Wilcox here. So rather than have them come straight up the pike here, that would just put them in the way of Longstreet up here. We just had them retreat off to the west. They are basically done for this scenario. As a matter of fact, being at fatigue level 4, we can just turn them 90 degrees. And I did decide to go ahead and advance Wilcox out to the west there, simply because he's got 7 manpower. It's only a 5 combat value because of his disorganization. Rodman here has 6, which is 1 better, but Wilcox does have 3 artillery points to Rodman's 2, and that may contribute to a better DRM if Wilcox is attacked here by any Confederate reinforcements arriving. So we'll move on to Rodman here. We'll go ahead and increase his fatigue level to fatigue level 3, and that means another extended march roll. And again, because he's organized, we don't have to worry about losing any strength points. We are going to need a 4 or less to maintain our organization, and 5 plus 1 becomes a 6. So they do get a little disorganized as the Union continues to push hard in the scenario here. They're going to go 1, 2, and I think they will go ahead and stop here in Zittlestown. I'd considered perhaps continuing on and moving south here to Fox Gap to trap D.H. Hill. I don't think they're strong enough to actually make an attack with any success here on Hill's hex, and rather than having Hill make an attack here and potentially force them to retreat, were they to retreat, they wouldn't be able to stop here in Zittlestown, and Hill would be able to kind of follow up and maybe turn the tables here on Wilcox on the west side of the mountain. So rather than that, we'll just have them make their stand here in the objective hex, and that is going to wrap up this particular activation. So we'll go back to initiative and see who's going to act next. And, well, the Union is on quite a roll here today. That's 3-1. So that's going to be the Union again. And now, even though Wilcox had to end his activation last time because of the attack, that did not increase his fatigue necessarily. So he's at fatigue 3. Both of these divisions are at fatigue 3, which means they could technically activate again, although they'll be making another extended march roll, and this time they are going to be using one of the disorganized columns because they were disorganized previously. And in this case, if they fail that extended march roll, they're going to end up losing strength points because of that. So I think what we might do instead, although it would be nice to maybe press the advantage here while we can, and maybe make an attack here on Boonesboro. There are only 2 Confederate strength points in Boonesboro right now. Wilcox certainly would seem to have a decent chance of taking the town. I just am considering starting to bring up Hooker's Corps back here. What I'm worried about at this point on the Union side, having seized the gap here and grabbed 2 of the victory point locations, I'd like to make sure that we can hold on to them and maybe not get a little overextended, particularly with some relatively powerful Confederate forces moving down here eventually, presumably, from the north, if and when Longstreet can get his guys going. And if the Union continues to get activation after activation like they have been, it's quite conceivable Hooker's Corps could come right up here, swing through these northern passes, and actually interpose themselves between Longstreet and Reno's 9th Corps, which I think would pretty much seal the scenario victory in favor of the Union at that point. I'm going to have to think about this, weigh the pros and cons of whether I'm going to activate Wilcox here to try to grab Boonesboro or begin to have Hooker move his 1st Corps up. So let me ponder this a spell, and then we'll continue. Now, looking at the odds or chances of success here for Wilcox to attack Rhodes at Boonesboro, I'm looking at maybe a +2 on the attack, which is not fantastic. And if it doesn't go well, it will definitely end up costing the Union a strength point or potentially 2. So I think instead what we've decided to do is go ahead and activate Hooker, and seeing as his 3 divisions are all within command radius, we're just going to activate all 3 of them here. And now we will roll to see If we can get another good roll for movement points, which we need, and we do get a very good roll. That's a 5 plus 1. That's going to be 6 movement points for Hooker's units. And we will start off basically just in order here. This should be a fairly fast activation considering I don't anticipate any combat. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then before I go any further, I'm sure you're catching this at home, need to increase the fatigue. I tell you what, it's going to take me a while to fully internalize that, especially if I get any breaks in between being able to play this. So now next up is Hatch's division. He'll move up behind him, and then finally we have Ricketts' division. They will increase their fatigue, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is it for that particular activation. Rolling for initiative now again. And we finally see the Confederates win initiative. Now, obviously with the Confederates, they really want to get Longstreet down here as quickly as they can, but they've also got D.H. Hill's division here sort of stuck almost on the wrong side of the mountain and in danger indeed of being cut off. In fact, he was not cut off pretty much because the Union decided not to do so. And I think as much as I want to get Longstreet or somebody into Boonesboro here to strengthen the defenses, I think it would be a little more important to pull D.H. Hill and the Virginia cavalry out of their current position. So we can't activate both of them. And we're going to be going to have to choose. I'm going to go with Hill's division. We're going to activate Hill's division, and Hill's division is going to have, let's see, well, they're going to have 5 movement points. I've been rolling very well, I would say, for movement this whole game so far. The 5 is, unfortunately, they'd love to get the 5, but unfortunately because of the zones of control, there's Rodman is extending a zone of control into here by virtue of this road that comes down from Zittlestown. That's going to force Hill to stop unless he wants to make an attack. He is going to increase his fatigue to fatigue level of 2, and that's going to draw him back here. I don't think it would be very profitable to have Hill make that attack. I think for the Confederates, I mean, things obviously are not looking very good for them right now. The Ninth Corps has basically just blasted their way right through the gap here. So the only hope I see right now for a Confederate victory would be a counterattack on the part of Longstreet's boys coming down here, and in that case, having Hill in position here might actually bring some benefits, maybe in the way of potential flank attack bonuses or potentially inflicting any losses on Union retreats that need to pass through Zittlestown. So I think we're just going to have Hill remain here for now. We still have the option of activating him again on a future action phase to move on out if necessary. So not a very impressive or in-depth, lengthy activation by the Confederates, but at least they got to do something after watching the Union pretty much run rampant so far. So on to the next initiative, and this one is going to be back to the Union again, unfortunately, and I think it's probably going to be Hooker. Let me kind of stop and think a minute here and see. Actually, no, you know what? It's definitely going to be Hooker, and I think we are just going to follow through on that plan. We're going to try and get Hooker to get his guys up and through these passes up here, and love to get him up along this Blacklock Creek before Longstreet can get there, but that I think is a very long shot. Let's see how many movement points Hooker is going to get, and here we go. We start to cool off a little bit. That's going to be a 2. We do get the +1 for Hooker's for the leader activation, so it'll be 3 total, which really isn't terribly good. And of course now we start to wonder, it's a long way to go up this way. It's a lot shorter to get over here and maybe try and punch through Fox's Gap. We've had pretty decent success pushing the Confederates out of the mountain passes here earlier. If we were to try the roundabout, the northern path, we're only going to get to here, and that's going to be fatigue level 2 for all of his corps. Of course, we're still not going to get close enough. 1, 2, 3. We're still going to be just short of being able to even attack the cavalry here, but we'll be in a position on the next time the Union gets an activation where we should be able to close up and make an attack here. Pushing the cavalry back should be no problem. They may even retreat of their own accord, and then we've got a much better chance here of actually getting to grips with D.H. Hill, I think, rather than getting up here. Let's see, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It looks like it's technically possible, but it would require a 5 and a 6 dice roll on the next 2 activations to get to even reach Black Block Creek for Hooker's troops. That being the case, I think we will take the shorter, a little more sure thing here. 1, 2, 3 to here, and of course we need to increase the fatigue level as they activate. And then next up is Hatch here. He's going to go 1, 2, 3. And finally we've got Ricketts going 1, 2, 3. That's going to do it for that particular activation and the next one. And again, the Union is, they've probably won, what, 9 out of 10 initiatives so far this game. So seems to be pretty one-sided as far as that goes, at least so far. And again, we will activate Hooker's Corps. We'll get all 3 of them here, and now the question is, how many movement points are they going to get? If we roll poorly like we did last time, this may not be as straightforward an assault. And again, Hooker is consistent, so that's going to be another 3 movement points. What I'm going to do is maybe take a minute here and see what we can do with these 3, because the attack, that's not even enough. Even were we adjacent to a Confederate, that's not enough movement points to give us a prepared attack. So I'll take a minute here and sort of think about how I want to try and pull this off, and then we'll continue. All right, having thought about this, we are going to activate the lead division here first, if I can grab this marker, and that is Meade's division. Oops. I'll tell you what, one thing about this system, as you can see, each of these hexes, each of these stacks only contains a single unit, and yet you can see there's a fair amount of counter congestion here, which is why they do provide force displays, which I can definitely see you needing if you've got an entire corps stacked in a hex, because that, if you could imagine these 3 stacks all in this one hex, that's a 9 high stack. That's pretty unwieldy. Because when you think about it, every unit in the game is going to have at least two counters, one for the unit, one for the strength points. Then as soon as they do anything, they're picking up a fatigue, so that's another counter. If they're demoralized, that's a 4th counter, like we see here. If there's a leader in the hex, that's 5 counters. Yeah, I can see where using the force markers can have some value here. But I want to keep things, certainly for the sake of all of you viewers, just keep the units on the map for this scenario. And again, it's not out of control. It's not too bad. We do have to increase the fatigue to 3 here, which means we will be making an extended march roll for Meade here. They are going to get that +1 again, so we're looking for a 4 or less on the die in order to avoid any issues, and that 5+1. The Union has been rolling high all game, but this is where it has been biting them, actually. So Meade's boys are going to be disorganized, and then they're going to move up to this hex for 1. Now, once they enter this hex, they're adjacent to the Confederate cavalry. This is going to give the cavalry the chance to do what is called a cavalry retreat in this system. It's a neat little mechanic that I really kind of like. We're going to roll 1d6. It's going to have a couple of modifiers to it in this case, and what this is going to do, it's going to allow the cavalry to retreat 4 to 6 hexes, but in the process it could potentially reduce the number of movement points that remain to the active unit. So really, I think, cool way of sort of representing like a delaying action by the more mobile cavalry forces. In this case, since they are in a mountain hex, they're going to get a +1 to the die roll. Is it a +1? Let's see, maybe it's a +2 since they're in a mountain. So the same terrain modifier is going to be used that they would get in combat if they were defending in the hex as to this cavalry retreat roll. So being in a mountain hex, that's going to be a +2. Unfortunately, there's only 1 strength point there, which means they're going to get the small force modifier, which is a -2. So that's going to cancel each other out. Now, if they roll a 1, that's going to be bad because that's going to inflict a 1 strength point loss on the cavalry retreating, which in this case would be enough to eliminate them. And let's just roll and see what happens. We don't have to worry about that. It's a 5. So now what we're going to do is divide that number in half to 2.5, round it down to a whole number, which is 2. That is the number of movement points that the active unit now loses as a result of the cavalry delaying action, and then the cavalry is going to get to retreat 4 to 6 hexes, and that's following the retreat charts that you do normally for combat. So they are disorganized as a result of the cavalry retreat, however, but they do not have to worry about any step losses that may be inflicted on the retreat charts in the course of the retreat. So in this case, we're going to have to go here first, and then we're going to have to go here, and I think we'll go 3 and 4, and they will end up here in Roarsville. So we did get at least some Confederate troops here into the southernmost victory point hex, although it is just a single strength point of cavalry, and they are with a combat value of 1/2, so it's not much, but it is something. Now, Hooker, since there was no combat, there's no advance after combat, and he had a total of 3 movement points. He spent 1 to enter here. He's going to subtract 2 from that, which leaves him with 0. So the cavalry, in a way, actually, they did their job. They prevented Hooker from actually getting up into the mountains, and they were able to get away intact here across the mountains. So next up, we are looking at, I think, Hatch's division, and Hatch will... he'll go 1, since there's no road here, it's a little inconvenient. He's going to go 1, 2, and then 3 into the mountain hex after I increase his fatigue to fatigue level 3, which means I also have to make an extended march roll. This one is yet another high roll for the Union. That is going to disorganize his 10 strength points. That's going to leave him with a combat value of 7. And a fatigue 3 here, and that's his 3. And then finally with Ricketts, we'll do the same thing here. We'll increase his fatigue to fatigue 3, and we will need to make that extended march roll, and it is another 5, which is another failure and more disorganization. Let's see. Now, unfortunately for Ricketts, he's not really going to be able to, well, I guess we'll keep them all together here. We'll go 1, 2, and 3 and kind of pack him in here. So Hooker's corps is not quite measuring up to 9th Corps today, it would appear. But that's going to wrap up yet another Union activation, and now we'll roll one more time here and see what we get, and it is yet another Union activation. So now got to consider what we want to do here. Obviously, we've got a total of, we've got the cavalry here. We also have all of 1st Corps and these 2 divisions that are still eligible to act, but they're all at fatigue level 3 and they're all disorganized. Now take a minute here, see what I want to do, because potentially we could get this group activated, that group activated, or maybe the cavalry. I might send, I'd wanted to get somebody out here in front of Longstreet, maybe swinging the Union cavalry around, not necessarily to try and stand there, but maybe do what the Confederate cavalry did. I'll take a look at things here. We'll pick back up in a moment. Looking at things, I think I think maybe we will go ahead and see if we can get the 8th Illinois Cavalry here to kind of ride around to the north and maybe get into position up here. The cavalry, let's see, first we're going to give them increase their fatigue levels. That's going to be a fatigue 1 for them. And with cavalry, they get a 2d6 roll for their movement points. So potentially giving them a ways to go. And we see they get 8 movement points. How far can that take them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So not quite as far as we would have liked. Still on the wrong side of the mountains, but they are close enough. I think if the Union can win one more initiative in a row, that should be enough to get the cavalry over here, and hopefully we're looking not so much to stop Longstreet as to just slow him down. So let's see, here's the initiative roll coming up, and it's going to be won by the Confederates. So I think with D.H. Hill in position where he is, I think the choice here for the Confederates is to go ahead and get Longstreet's boys moving. Let's see how many movement points they get. They'd like to get a good roll here, and they do not. They get a 2 plus 1 for, plus 2. Yes, plus 2 for Longstreet. So that's going to be 4 movement points. Not great, but it still should leave them able to get into some kind of position where they can perhaps counterattack and push the Union back. Everybody's activated here once already, and let's see, with Longstreet, he's just going to come down 1, 2, 3, 4. So he is at least in the vicinity of Boonesboro. The rest of the column will follow down. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, we'll have Hood 1, 2, 3, 4 come over here, and that is going to wrap up another activation. Boy, these activations, they do go pretty quickly. I mean, it bounces back and forth very rapidly, particularly if you're just activating a single unit. I mean, I've been doing a lot of leader activations, which are multiple units, but even those are not taking very long at all, particularly if there's no actual combat going on. So this looks to be a very fast-playing system, which is awesome. That said, we're up for another initiative roll, as a matter of fact, and this one is going to be the Confederates again. So they seem to be getting their act together here, and I'm going to roll real quick to see what kind of movement points we have to deal with. And that, whoops, wrong die there. Let's roll this. That boy, here we go. We've got 4 plus 2. That's going to be 6, having activated Longstreet. I suppose I should have said that. Hopefully at this point it's would be pretty self-evident what we're doing here. And as a matter of fact, that I'm going to hold off on roads here. Just have them defending there in Boonesboro. But we've got a number of movement points to work with. we're not in a position to make an actual assault with his troops, but the question is, do we want to go ahead and make some kind of an attack off the march, or do we want to just set ourselves up for an assault on a future activation? So let me think about this for a minute or two, and then we'll continue and see what Longstreet decides to do here to try to recover the situation for the Confederates. Well, with 6 movement points, let's see if old Pete can pull victory from the jaws of defeat. We'll start off here, I think, or will we? No, we won't. We're going to start off here with Hood. He is going to go to fatigue level 3, which means an extended march roll. There is no +1 for this because they're not Union troops. So really anything but a 6 and he should be okay. And that 2 means his troops are fine. And we are going to have him simply come straight down here, 1, 2 to there. Next, we'll go ahead and activate Evans' brigade. He too is going to increase his fatigue level to fatigue 3, and that will entail another roll. 3 means he is all right as well, and I think we're going to send him on up here to Hamburg Pass just to plug this gap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That'll put him here ahead of the Union cavalry and hopefully prevent them from causing any distractions or issues further north. And that's going to leave just Longstreet here with D.R. Jones' division. They are also going to increase to fatigue level 3. So this is going to entail yet another extended march roll. Now the only thing that can happen to them is they get disorganized, although that would not be good. Fortunately, they don't have to worry about it with another 2. And Longstreet's going to spend 1 to move here to Boonesboro, and then with 5 remaining, he's going to spend 4 to do a prepared attack here on Wilcox and try to push him back over the mountain. So what do we have in terms of troop strength? Well, we've got 10 strength points there for Longstreet. Wilcox is going to be defending with a combat value of 5 because of the disorganization. So that's going to give us 2 to 1, which is not great, if I'm honest. It's only a +1. So flank attack bonus. Now, here we go. Let's take a look at this. This is probably more so than the retreats. I feel like I'm getting a fairly decent handle on the retreats, and in a lot of cases, it is fairly self-evident how the retreat is going to go. But this flank attack is still a little unsettled in my mind. So I'm going to take just a second here and we'll walk through this as slowly as I can. And again, for those of you with experience with the system, please feel free to let me know in the comments if I'm missing anything. So the first thing we're going to have to do is figure out how many covered hexes there are around Wilcox here. Let's see. Covered hex occupied by an undemoralized friendly unit to the attacker, including the attacking unit himself. So that's going to be Longstreet and Hood. So we've got 2 right there. It is in the ZOC of any undemoralized friendly unit to the attacker. That includes the attacking unit itself and including restricted ZOC, which I think would technically be here because of the forest and no road there. But we've got a 3rd one here from his ZOC, and we've got a 4th one here from D.H. Hill's ZOC. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here. Now the question is, this is a mountain hex. There's no road connecting here. Does Hood have a ZOC into the Washington Monument hex? I don't think so, as I understand the rules. So let's add 1, 2, 3 more. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hexes. Next is, it is a mountain or swamp hex, or the defender's hex is a mountain or swamp hex. The 2 hexes are not connected to each other by a road, pike, railroad, or trail. Well, that's definitely the case here. These 2 hexes are not connected. So that's going to give us 6 hexes, which is the maximum. So we have a basic flank bonus of +4 because we have 6 covered hexes. Now we have to see if that's reduced at all, and we're going to reduce it by 1 for each covered hex that meets the following 2 conditions. First is occupied by an undemoralized unit friendly to the defender. That's going to be Rodman here. He's disorganized, but he's not demoralized. So we'll subtract 1 there. And then it is unoccupied and separated from all adjacent units friendly to the attacker, untraversed by woods hex sides, untraversed by a road, pike, trail, or railroad. So it's unoccupied and separated from all adjacent units friendly to the attacker. That would be here by this woods hex side, but it is in fact adjacent to DH Hill, connected by a roadside here, so that's not going to factor into it. It is a mountain or swamp hex, and the defender's hex and the covered hex are not connected to each other by a road. That would be these 2 here. So we're going to, I think, subtract 1, subtract 2. It's not. We don't have any major minor rivers in play, and no hypothetical off-map hexes. So it looks like it's +4 for 6 covered hexes, -2 for these 2 hexes gives us a +2. The maximum reduction is -3, so we're under that. So I believe the flank bonus in this particular combat is going to be a +2. Again, for those of you with more experience with the system, please let me know if I am doing this, if I'm doing this correctly, if I'm understanding what they're trying to get across there. So flank attack bonus +2. Artillery modifiers. Wilcox has a 3. Dr. Jones has a 4. He is in rolling terrain. It's going to be a +1, but in rolling terrain that actually works out to be a -1. So that's going to bring us down to a net +1 so far. The defender's flanks are not refused. It's not an assault action. We get another +1 for the 2-to-1 ratio modifier. That brings us back up to +2. Tactical modifier. Wilcox is a 2. Longstreet here is a 4. So that's going to be another +2, which takes us to a +4. There's no rain. It is a prepared attack, so that's going to give us +5. On the defender's side, they're not defending across a bridge, dam, ferry, or ford. They are not defending in a mountain hex. They're not defending against attack up a ridge. They're not defending in a hill hex or across a creek. They're not demoralized. I don't see any game-specific modifiers, so it looks like 0 modifiers for the defender, +5 for the attacker. So this is, I think, the best attack that I've made yet this game on either side. So it should, let's see, guarantee us no worse than a net +0, which, well, that's not going to get it done. We're going to need better than that. Let's see what Longstreet does here. Huh. Well, that's interesting. Snake Eyes. But that's going to convert to a +5 thanks to the attacker DRMs, which is going to give us a net +5. So that is going to be enough to get the job done. Let's see, the defender has, I believe it's 7 strength points. Yep. So remember, with the disorganized, when they're disorganized, their manpower remains the same. It's just their combat value goes down. So when I'm looking at the combat charts, I'm still going to use the... well, see, this says combat value. That's interesting. Let me go ahead, and I was under the impression that I used the strength points of the defenders, not their combat value. But let me look that up, because that is going to make a difference whether we're on the 4 to 6 column or the 7 to 11 column. So let me check the rules one more time. Again, want to try and make sure I get this right. Don't want to build any bad habits early on, and then we'll go ahead and do the finish the resolution of the combat once I find my answer. Well, that didn't take long at all to look up, and the rules do match the wording on the combat chart. It does say combat value, not manpower. So that's going to be 5 for the defender's combat value. Puts them on the 4 to 6 column. The results are 2, demoralized or disorganized, and rout. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to reduce their manpower by 2 to 5. They're going to remain on their disorganized side. They're also going to increase their fatigue to fatigue level 4. I'm going to note the 2 Union strength point losses on the manpower loss track. And now it is a, let's see, disorganized. We inflicted that. Now it is a rout. So retreated 4 to 6 hexes. And they're going to pick up a demoralized 1 marker on top of everything else. So the route is 4 to 6 hexes. We will be using retreat chart 1, and we've got really our highest priority is along this road here. Even though it's in a ZOC, we are further from Longstreet here, so that rules out this one. This is not along a road. That one is, we can't enter that hex, across that hex side. So we're going to Rodman here. Now the question is this priority 3 or 4? Let's see. The retreat is into an enemy ZOC, but not an enemy occupied hex. It is into a hex more distant from the active enemy unit than retreated out of. So that qualifies here. And the loss is going to be 0 because the retreat is along a road or pike into a friendly occupied hex. So thanks to Rodman here, they will not suffer any losses because of Hill's boys. And then I think we will continue here into Reno in the same thing because it's friendly occupied. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, and I think they end up back here at Bolivar where they can stop their retreat. Now, what is the result to be implemented on the attacker? He's on the 7 to 11 column because he has a combat value of 10. It is an EA, so that's going to end his action. So the march is terminated, but they may advance, and I think Longstreet is going to do just that. He will advance into here, and that brings not only Jones's march activation to an end, it's going to end the Confederate activation as a whole. So we go back to initiative here, and this one is won by the Union. So there aren't too many Union troops that are still eligible to be activated. Wilcox, I'll turn him to the side here since he's at fatigue 4 along with Cox, and I think that's Sturgis under there. We basically got Hooker's Corps and Rodman's division. Rodman, I think, is going to just hunker down here and try and hold on to Zittlestown with the approach of Longstreet. The question is, does Hooker want to try and force Hill out of the pass here? Does he have a chance to do so? And I think we're going to go for it. Why not? Let's see. We're going to activate Hooker, which means that's going to be Hatch, Ricketts, and Meade's divisions. So these 3 are all going to activate. And now the question is, how many movement points are they going to have to work with? There's going to be a +1 for leader activation. Roll of 4. It's going to give them a fairly decent 5. Now, let me go ahead and take a look here and see what our options are. I think it's going to be pretty straightforward at this point. I think we'll probably start with activating the division here and making an attack. Everybody, I think, is at fatigue level 3, so this is going to be it for them. Probably not a high chance of success here against Hill, but it's about the only thing they have left to do. I suppose another option might be trying to move up and reinforce Rodman here, but I don't think we have the movement points with 5 even. That'd be 2, 4. Yeah, he wouldn't be any. I think he'd have to stop here when he got to into DH Hill. I think he's got a zone of control in there with the road. No, he does not. They're 2 separate passes here, except back here. All right, but I still think with the crowded roads, they don't have enough movement to get into Rodman's hex, unless I force march. But that could lead to some strength point losses here, which I don't know if that would be worth it. So, let's just go ahead and we'll make the attacker. We'll spend, let's see, we activate Hatch, and he's going to go to fatigue level 4. So we'll have to spend, or not spend, but make an extended march roll. He is disorganized, as you can see, which means I think there's a chance for, yes, chance for a potential strength point loss here. It's going to be +1 if the march by unit on its normal side increases fatigue from 3 to 4. So +1 for that, and then +1 for a union. So +2. This could be costly. I'm going to need a 3 or less here, and fortunately roll a 1. So no step losses to Hatch, which means he can spend 4 for the prepared attack on DH Hill. DH Hill has 4 strength points, as you see there, so it's 7 to 4. That's not even a 2 to 1. That's going to be a 1 to 1. What do we have? Flank attack bonus. I guess we can go back to recalculating this again. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 is the basic, but then we're going to subtract. We're going to subtract 1. So 5 is I think that's a +2 for the flank attack, the basic flank attack bonus. Actually, let me look that up again. So, yeah, this seems a bit fiddly for, particularly compared to how kind of smooth and elegant the rest of the system is. So 5 covered hexes is a +2 basic flank bonus. However, that's going to be, we're going to subtract 1 for that, and I think that's it. What about this one? It is an unoccupied hex separated from all adjacent units friendly to the attacker by Wood's hex sides, which this is. Untraversed, so we will subtract 1 for this hex and 1 for this hex. So what it ends up being is it's a +2 basic, -2 gives us a +0 for the flank attack. Artillery modifiers, we've got 4 to 2. It's +2, but it's in the mountain, so there's no effect in mountain hexes. Defender's flanks are refused. No, it's not an assault. Ratio is +0. Tactical modifier, DHL is a 3, Hatch is a 2. That's actually a -1, and that's going to be canceled out by the prepared. So it's +0 for the attacker. Then for the defenders, he's in a mountain hex. That's going to be +2 for him, and I think that's it. So it's going to turn into a +2 for the defender. So +2 the red die. We'll see how Hatch fares here. They're looking really just to kind of push him out of the hex, which means I think they're going to need a +2 final net to do it. And they roll well, but not as well as the defenders. That's going to be an 8 on the red die to 5. That's a -3. So no effect on Hill. And as we come across here, he has, what do we say, Hatch had 7, is that right? These are big divisions compared to the Confederates. So 7 to 11 column -3, that's 2 step losses and a disorganized fatigue. So 2 more step losses, that brings the Union total to 5. And what they're doing here is basically giving the Confederates some free victory points by inflicting these step losses, which may lead me to reconsider making any attacks here. Not that we can even really reach Hill now with Hatch in a way. I suppose we can move up there. That would be 2. We wouldn't even have enough to get a prepared attack. And Ricketts, let's see, Hooker, it'd still be like a -1 even if Hooker himself went up there and led the attack. So see if we can find something else for these guys to do, and I'm not seeing it. So I think we still, unfortunately, since we activated them, have to increase their fatigue level, which means a die roll, and again it's going to be a 50-50 to lose a strength point to stragglers here. And wow, well, don't have to worry about that. That's a 1 there for Meade's division. And then lastly here we're looking at Ricketts. He needs a 3 or less to avoid any issues, and he does not. So that's a 7 on the extended march. with a manpower of 9 is going to be a 1 strength point loss. That's going to lower him to 8. That does not, however, count against, it doesn't count towards the victory points here in this situation. So that's going to wrap up that activation. And let's see who gets the next initiative here. And I think it is, well, it's going to be the Confederates. So we'll see what we want to do here. I think we're going to go ahead and activate Longstreet. And Longstreet is going to get a grand total of 6 movement points. So I'll take a minute here to look over the situation and see if we have a chance maybe to retake Zittlestown and start to push 9th Corps back east over the mountains. Well, I wouldn't say it's a great chance of success, but I think it is. It's going to be the Confederates' last chance to try to pull out a victory here. I think the victory points might be leaning in the Union's favor. So we're only going to activate Jones's division here that's stacked with Longstreet, even though we are activating Longstreet to get the leader bonus for the movement points and then allow him to participate in the attack, which is what he's going to do. He's going to spend 4 movement points to do a prepared attack on Rodman. Now, I guess before we get to the actual combat itself, we're going to need to increase their fatigue level. That goes up to 4, and that is going to require another extended march roll. Now, this is an important roll because if D.R. Jones becomes disorganized, that's going to lower his combat value, which may decrease the odds ratio in the coming attack. And we do have a +1 because it's a unit on its normal side that's increasing from fatigue level 3 to 4. So it's a +1, and they're going to need basically anything but a 5 or 6. And unfortunately, that 6 +1 is a 7. That is going to disorganize them, dropping their combat value to 7. The defender has a combat value of 4, which go from 2 to 1 down to 1 to 1. So that's going to cost them a +1 ultimately in the attack resolution. So let's see what we have here. Flank attack bonus. So we've got covered hexes. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is a +2. Then subtracting that, we got -1 for Reno here. This one is still going to count because it's connected via road by D.H. Hill here. This one, however, is a mountain, so I think that's going to, we're going to get a basic +2, -1, -2 to a +0. Artillery modifiers, it is a mountain hex, so there are none. Defender's flanks are not refused. No assault action. Ratio modifier is unfortunately +0. Tactical modifier. Here's Longstreet's 4 to Rodman's 2 is going to give them a +2. It's not raining, and +1 for the prepared. So a total of +3 for the attackers. On the defender's side, they're defending in a mountain hex, so that's going to be +2. And that's all I see. So a +4 and a +2 kind of nets out to a +2 for the attackers. Net DRM. Let's roll here a +2 on the attacker side. So Longstreet, to be successful here, I think needs to roll just his die roll needs to equal or exceed the Union's die roll. Let's see if Rodman can hold on in Zittlestown. And boy, it's close. We get a 3 to 2. That's a +1. So on the defender, it's going to be he's got 4 combat value, 4 to 6. That's going to be a disorganized fatigued. So that's going to run his fatigue up. He's already disorganized, so I don't believe there is any additional result if he's already disorganized. But he does hold the hex. And the +1 for Longstreet on the 7 to 11. That's going to be a 1 and disorganized. So they are going to lose 1 strength point, which is going to ultimately kind of help the Union there. But more importantly, much more importantly, the Union was able to hold on to to Zittlestown, which should score them some decent victory points here at the end. And I think, speaking of the end, I think we are rapidly approaching that now that Longstreet's big unit has hit his 4 fatigue level and is no longer eligible to be activated. The only guys, we've got Evans here, Hood, and Rhodes, but I don't think any of them are, well, I guess we've got, yeah, problem is I don't know that we could do, maybe we could do an assault, but individually I don't think any of them are strong enough to budge Rodman, because I think the best they're going to get is a 1-to-1, and that's if Hood attacks. So I think that last attack by Longstreet was the South's last best chance of pushing the Union back any further, and thanks to the failed extended march roll, that resulted in the division becoming disorganized, which lowered it from a 2-to-1 to a 1-to-1, and that +1 ended up being the difference. If they had gotten just one more higher result, they would have forced Rodman to retreat, and then they would have been able to advance into the hex and reclaim Zittlestown. I don't see much reason really to continue at this point. The Union is going to pass because they have the only unit eligible to activate still is the cavalry here, and they're not going anywhere with Evans here, and D.H. Hill and Jones there. So the Union would go ahead and pass, and I think the Confederates don't want to risk losing any more strength points in what would probably be fruitless attacks here against Rodman. So they will pass as well, and that's going to bring the turn to an end. And in that case, being a one-turn scenario, it's going to bring the scenario to an end. So let's go ahead. I guess if we look at the sequence of play, there is a recovery phase after the activation phase, after the action phase. Recovery phase is basically where units can entrench, build bridges, repair bridges and ferries, recover from fatigue, disorganization, exhaustion, and demoralization. None of which is going to have any impact on this particular game, but I can see where it would in multi-turn games, certainly. So let's just go straight to looking at the victory points and see actually who won. I suspect it's a Union victory, but perhaps not anything more than a marginal Union victory. Let's see. All right, looking at the victory conditions and the victory point schedule. Union infantry unit occupies Boonesboro. No, the rebels were able to hold on to that. Union infantry occupies Zittlestown. Yes, Rodman is there. That's going to be +4. If a Union infantry occupies Rohrersville down here, that's no. If a Union infantry unit occupies Mountain House, which Reno does here, that's going to be another +3, so that's +7 total. And then +1 for each point of Confederate manpower lost in combat. I'm showing 4 on the manpower loss track. So we've got 4 for Zittlestown, 3 for Mountain House is 7, 4 for losses is a total of 11 victory points, and then it's -1 for each point of Union manpower lost in combat, which I'm showing as a 5. So 11 -5 puts us at 6, and that is in the 5 to 7 range, which is a Union substantive victory. So substantive victory for the Union. Interesting little scenario here. I now officially have my first game of GCACW in the books. So, what's the verdict? Well, it is far too small of a sample size to make any definitive judgments, but I will say that at least the first impressions are extremely good. This is, I can see why folks speak so highly about this system. This is a fun little system here, and I can immediately see the immense replayability in this little scenario here. This single turn, and we had the Union getting some good rolls early on, winning several initiatives in a row, and not only winning those initiatives, but Reno's Ninth Corps getting good rolls for their movement points, which allowed them to kind of bash their way through the thin line of defenders before Longstreet could bring his guys down the road from Hagerstown. If I were to set this up and play this again right now, that could easily kind of reverse. And if the Confederates end up winning a lot of initiatives or winning initiative early, getting some good movement point rolls, maybe before Reno can even get up to South Mountain, Longstreet's got his boys in the line and making it almost impossible for the Union to make any headway whatsoever. So you've got not only the who wins initiative variability, but then when you win initiative, you don't know how many movement points you're going to get. You can uncork a lot of ones and end up having your guys dragging their feet, which is also not only is that not getting them moving as far as you want them to, but it's also kind of burning those activations. You get so much more out of a unit if you can roll well for their movement than you do if you're rolling low, and you're restricted really to at most 4 activations before you're done for the day. So actually I really like that, and I've found myself, as you probably saw, making some what at the time appeared to be difficult decisions. But again, part of that I think is unfamiliarity with the system. The more I play of this, the better idea I'll have of what constitutes a good attack, or at least gives me the prospects of having success in a certain attack in a certain situation. But there's a lot with this one turn scenario that I haven't experienced, even among within the basic game. For instance, the implications of running your guys all the way up to fatigue level 4, because I know in the recovery phase you're going to recover 3 fatigue levels, which means those guys are going to start off the next day already at fatigue level 1, and I believe if they're at fatigue level 3 or 4 during the recovery phase, they're flipped over to their exhausted side, which is reflected here with the white stripe across the top. And with that, the extended march roll kicks in whenever they go from fatigue level 1 to fatigue level 2. So if they're exhausted and do anything that next day, they're going to have to start rolling to possibly become disorganized, making them less effective. So I can already see where in longer scenarios you're kind of balancing the need for your troops to move and do something versus not getting them fatigued so much that they are less effective the next day or the next couple of days, because it may take a while. I think fatigue level 0 or 1 during the recovery phase in order to recover from exhaustion and flip back to the normal side, which means you basically have been limited to not really doing anything that day that you're exhausted. So I kind of like the idea of that, where you're pushing your guys hard and then it's going to take a couple of days for them to recover. I think that probably results in a bit of a not necessarily an ebb and flow, but little spurts of activity followed by some recovery days, and it'll probably give you something approaching a more historical pace of operations than you find in most war games. But that is just conjecture on my part based on my understanding of the rules, not having actually played it. But that's what I would expect to see, which is nice, which is really good. So I think it's going to do it for today's playthrough. Hope you enjoyed watching me kind of stumble through this new game series here. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm looking forward to playing more of this, and I'm looking forward to playing bigger scenarios and maybe even diving into some of the campaign games down the line. So big thumbs up so far for great campaigns in the American Civil War, and I'm going to probably maybe even reset this up off camera here and run through this again to see just how different it can turn out under different circumstances, and then definitely dive into some of the bigger meatier scenarios out there. So thanks again for watching today. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time.